Hi, welcome to the Let's Talker Show. I'm DV LeBron. Do you have construction needs? Maybe you want to get a new patio done, or maybe you have a kitchen remodel. Check out K&H Construction. They're a local company. Chris Helms from here in Waxahachie. Check them out and let them know DV LeBron sent you. Today, my very special guest is someone that I caught online, a unicorn, Miss Shannon Watson from Majority in the Middle. How are you?
I'm good, DV. Thanks so much for taking the time.
Thank you so much for coming on. I saw your bio about wanting to get back to the middle in our political discord and how we function, and I said, oh wow. I mean, it's such an admirable thing, but with things the way they are, it's either you're for or against. There's so much that goes into that, so I definitely wanted to talk to you as someone who's working to try to bridge that and trying to change the way that we do things politically. But
Yeah.
first, can you give a brief intro about yourself?
Sure. So I live in Minnesota now. I'm a Minnesotan by choice. I'm a Kansan by birth. I am the oldest of three. And I'll tell you, man, I check all the psychological boxes of oldest children. Let's see, I've worked in public affairs and public policy and lobbying for about the last 15 years. And that overlapped with some time that I spent on campaigns, a little more than 20 years. But once I hit 20, I just put a plus after it. It's just like 20-ish.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I'm doing.
Wow. And so you've been in this political world for quite some time and gotten experience about it. So you know the toxic nature of it.
I
And
do.
you've done talks, you even, you got an organization going, and we're going to get more into the organization, but why is this divide happening? What is it because of a profit motive? Is it because it sells? Because the way I like to explain it, the way I see it, and
Uh-huh.
obviously who cares about what I think, but I can't wait to hear what you think. The ants. If you stir up the ants, you could get them to do
Yeah.
what you want them to do, and there's power in that. But I'd really love to see your take, since this is what you do every day.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy people are really hard to motivate. Motivation is easiest when there's fear or anger involved, which is one of the reasons that our political campaigns lean into that fear and anger. Most of them do. There are a couple that try not to. They try to take the higher road. Unfortunately, there's what I call campaign industrial complex. Like we used to have the Eisenhower military industrial complex, which is a thing. I think we're in campaign industrial complex where, they're needing to raise money all the time, and they're needing to fundraise all the time, and motivate voters all the time. And when you do that, when you're constantly churning the messaging about, why we should fear each other, why we should fear the other side being in power, how important it is that I fight for you. I mean, when's the last time you had a candidate say, I'm not going to fight. I will go to compromise for you. That's not a message that you ever hear. But so that's where we sort of get into the mentality. And the terrible part is that it works. And so staff has learned, consultants have learned that this is the way you do it.
Are they tapping into a natural kind of a natural thing in the human psyche,
Oh yeah.
get this thing that is just natural for conflict, and do you think that they're playing on that?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's actually one of the things that I loved the most about doing this work and learning a lot about conflict is the number one reason that we are divided is because we're humans, and humans do that. We put people into groups. We find us and we find them. And we just naturally do that. It's not because it's malicious or that we're all evil or we're all, leaning into sort of our worst instincts, but just because like that's just naturally what we do. And if we're not aware of it, it's really hard to get out of. And then the other piece that, yeah, like why are we divided? I think we are divided, but it's not quite as bad as it seems because, you've got the really loud voices on the far left, you've got the really loud voices on the far right. And then you have what I call the majority in the middle, just these people in the middle who have dropped out of that conversation. And without their voices, when you're only hearing two very polar opposites, it makes it feel like everything is dire and we're completely divided and it's awful. I don't necessarily think that's the case. And that's why we need to get people who are in the middle, whatever that means to them, back in the game, get them back in the conversation.
You look at some of the political graphs where political scientists have done, where they look at where how politics have divided over time. I'm old enough to remember Reagan and Tip O'Neill.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Democrats, Republicans trying to figure out a way. It wasn't always the perfect legislation, or it wasn't this, but they had a common goal to make
Yeah.
things better. And so the divide, but when you look at some of these graphs, it just goes like this.
Right.
And like the sides are, and I like to say, I haven't moved.
Right.
I became my party affiliation and the way I think I became that somewhere around September 11th.
Okay.
And at that time I was considered center left.
Okay.
At this point in time, I haven't moved, mind you. I am considered a right-wing extremist that should be and it's sad because I am not an ugly and hateful person, but
Right.
these words, tell me about how we get past the words, because the words are the hyperbole, the Hitler. Everybody's Hitler.
Yeah. That's so hard. So like I said, I live in Minnesota, and we about 2 months ago, a little over 2 months ago, we had some politically inspired violence.
Yeah.
And we had one of our House members who was assassinated. And there were people at the time who were saying, like, I don't even know how to react because I don't have the words. And to your point, I don't think we had the words. Number one, because it's horrific and awful and came out of nowhere. And we're like, what in the world is happening? But also because we use the word shocked and appalled. And, like we've turned our outrage dial up to 11 on what people put in tweets. So when our outrage dial should be at 11, we have no idea how to feel because we're just so outraged all the time. Like we've hit the ceiling. There's no more above to go. And so, yeah, that's one of the things that we try to do to bridge divides is beyond like toning down the rhetoric, also understanding that your political views are your political views and your positions on policy are yours. And the way you talk about things, the way you post about things, your positions on stuff, those belong to you. And whether you are a member of the Democratic Party or the Republican Party or no party, whatever, like those groups, all of the groups, and even like the third parties, like they contain a lot of diversity of thought. We don't assume that. So we sort of naturally peg anybody who is a Republican. Okay, they all absolutely 100% agree with Donald Trump and should be held responsible for the things that Donald Trump does. I can tell you for a fact, not everybody who identifies as a Republican agrees with Donald Trump. Not everybody who identifies as a Democrat agrees with AOC or Bernie Sanders or Democratic Socialists or whatever. So like partially it's changing our language, and partially it's just dealing with the person we have in front of us and ask, what do you think? Not just assuming that the shorthand is you are a member of a political party and thus you agree with sort of the most extreme in your own party.
Lockstep.
Yes.
Lockstep. Not everybody's in lockstep.
Absolutely.
It's just not. It's not the way that it should be. I think that maybe the way that we do politics in this country, where it's two parties. Yeah, there are other parties, two parties that have all the money, have everything going to them. So you have two choices. Whenever I was asked, well, how could you? I had two choices. I
Right.
wasn't gonna not vote. I wasn't gonna throw away my vote. My vote is valuable.
Yeah.
I had friends who lost their lives in Iraq for that. So it means something to me.
You're taking it seriously. Yeah.
Exactly. It has to. I have to do something with it. So I had two choices, and that's it. Do you think that the way our system is feeds into this?
If you applied the rules of political business, like I know this is the thing, like there's a campaign industry, politics is a business, particularly when you're talking about the two major parties. Part of the challenge with challenging those candidates in that system is the ballot access issues. And ballot access, you have to, there are different rules in every state because the states are the ones that run the elections. They have, some guidance and some things, but like the access rules are set at every state. And if you look at the access rules, if you look at all kinds of different things that sort of be like, oh, well, whether your campaign is valid or not, or you don't have enough money to be relevant in this. When you're looking at all those things, if you applied that same situation to any other industry in the country, people would get sued for antitrust violations. If you had Coke and Pepsi who actively kept Red Bull off the shelves because they are partnering up and they're like, no, we don't even want Red Bull on the shelf. Look, oh yeah, absolutely, Red Bull can exist. People can choose Red Bull, but we're going to work with the vendor to make sure it doesn't even make it to the shelf. So that's sort of the thing that I look at. We also spend a lot of time looking at systems, because the access to systems and the things that keep us divided, keep our legislators divided and sort of add to that division, they also have something to do with that.
Yes. And there's no denying, the role that money plays in politics in America. There's no denying. I don't know that as an organization, and just from your studies and looking at things, can you pinpoint an area or a time when this all went haywire?
No. COVID was an extra special case, and I think a lot of things became amplified and clarified during COVID. I was talking to somebody about a week ago about the 2020 presidential election, and I have a theory that one of the reasons the 2020 presidential election it got so ugly was because, think about that time, fall of 2020, we didn't really have sports. Like, we kind of did, but like the NFL was playing. If they had enough people who hadn't tested positive, and then you could play, but you couldn't have anybody in the stands, or high school sports was shut down, amateur sports was shut. The NBA stopped playing for a little bit. Since we didn't have sports, we didn't have healthy competition. And Americans like competition, and we need all of our healthy competitions to show us that we can be on opposite sides of things and still like the other person. Politics is one area that it goes really fast to, well, if you and I are voting the same way, we have very different morals. We do not believe the same thing. Okay, sometimes, like, to your point, you have two choices. Each one has like 50 things on their party platform. You may be voting for one, you may be voting against another, whatever. But we need like lots of divisions in our life. So, you can be friends with renters if you own your home, or vice versa. You can have people who have multiple laptop screens, or just one, or multiple screens, or just a little laptop. People who think Ross was justified during the break or not. Like, we need to have all of those kind of small divisions so that we can tackle the big divisions. And sometimes, like, we forget how important that is.
Yes. Yeah.
Sorry, I sort of went on a little tangent there.
No. Well, that's what I love. I want my guests to speak about the things that they know. I love that.
Yeah.
My show's never really been about me. Nobody cares about what I think. It's always about my guests, and that's why I love making my guests feel at home, and because it's your information that I'm seeking for my community. Ways to get past the current political climate. And I'm not speaking just in general in parties, but just the political climate where there's families. This is something that's new to me. I'm an old guy. I don't remember a time when your cousin wouldn't speak to you again, or families would, completely disown somebody over a political choice. I don't remember a time. And I had a conversation with someone who, they were very different politically than me. And we had been talking about all kinds of things. And, we were chumming, we were good. Everything was on a positive note. And so he saw me I saw him.
Yeah.
We were talking about kindness and this and that. And then it hit on the politics. And I could see that he was taken aback because the guy he liked the guy he was talking to.
Right.
Into the guy he was talking to revealed something that it was a taboo to him. And then I saw him tense up. And I said, you know, did you think what did you think of me before we led into this part of the conversation? And then he was like, no, everything's good. Everything is good. I said, do I seem evil to you? Am I this ugly, terrible guy that wants to kill you? And he was like, no. And I said, exactly. I said, we were both concerned about the same things. We were both talking about stuff that we agreed upon. And we found out that we're both human and that we both like to live in kindness.
Isn't that awesome? Isn't that what we should be doing?
And it's just, we've gone so far. And then you talked about political violence earlier where you had, and it's happening more. From the congressional baseball game to there's just been many acts, and it kind of separate. That's the kind of stuff that I saw when I'm overseas, or the stuff you hear from other things. How do we turn this volume down? How do we turn this temperature down? Because I know that's what you're doing every day. You're working on turning the temperature down.
One of the things that we did, and I will say, like, I can talk about political division. I can talk about legislative rules. I can talk about all kinds of things all day long. Political violence is a new area for me. And so luckily within one of my friend groups happens to be a guy whose name is Nathan Stock. And he is an expert on political violence. He has done work he lives in Minnesota now, but he's done work in other states and in other countries. He lived in Gaza for, I think it was 4 years. You know, he knows what he's talking about. So he was my first, like, as people were calling me that Saturday morning saying, hey, this is going to be important how we talk about this. And we, you know, like, make sure you speak up fast, which, you know, there was no pressure to that at all.
Right.
He was my first phone call. Because that's the thing, like, I don't necessarily know. So one of the things that we did is we put together an initiative called What We Can Do Week. And it was actually like 17 days, so it wasn't really a week. We went a little overboard. But one of the very first things, the first sort of kickoff event to that was the signing of what we call the Civic Pledge for a Stronger Minnesota. And it is a very basic thing. It's 4 lines. It's like, you know, I condemn political violence, and I will downplay the rhetoric that adds to it. I will do the work of finding common ground. Really super simple thing. And we held an event, and we had legislators and community organization and business leaders formally sign this pledge. We did it 2 by 2. It was really fun. But that was just there's some psychology in, like, here's the baseline. Here's the thing that we all agree on. And I will say, if you look at the statement, it's kind of well, duh. Of course we all agree with this. But that's part of the thing in moving forward, is showing that, we've all got this baseline, and we're all going to, you know, stick to, this is what we think. And there's some psychology in, if you sign something like that, the physically signing of it makes you accountable to yourself. Because that's always the challenge with pledges. Sometimes they're gotchas, and sometimes people were, well, what about accountability? And I will say, like, I've been one of those people. But just this, I don't know, it was just the coming together to sign the pledge and saying, yes, this is what we believe. And this is not unique to Minnesota. Any state, anybody can, you know, we've got it on a website. Anybody can sign the pledge. It can be Stronger Minnesota or Stronger Kansas or Stronger Texas or whatever. We will share.
Nice. I like that. And so your work has been locally in Minnesota, or have you been trying to venture out and try to get the federal politics involved in this?
Not yet. Minnesota is a great place to look at sort of political reforms and political engagement, partially because the majorities in our legislature swap back and forth a lot. It's not like Kansas, where I grew up, where Republicans are generally in control of the legislature, like, for most of my life. But so they switch back and forth. So it's easy to look at systems instead of just people, because sometimes these people are in power and sometimes these people are in power. We also do a lot of work on the nonpartisan local level, keeping those nonpartisan offices nonpartisan. Congress and the presidency, I actually spend very little time thinking about them. Like, that's like a 20-year plan. I want to figure out what works in Minnesota, replicate it in 49 other states, and then we'll go to DC.
It's such a behemoth thing. When you
Exactly.
start looking
Yes.
at the feds, it's like, it's the sun. It's huge, it's ginormous. And really, but politics are local. There's a
Absolutely. Yes.
politics are local, and it's surprising just how little people know how much local politics affect you and have a direction in your life and your kids' life. In Texas, it's a thing. Your
Yeah.
local politicians have a lot of sway over many things that affect your life.
Right.
So, and those politics in the last few years have become, some of these races are nonpartisan races,
Right.
but they're not nonpartisan. They come out,
Functionally nonpartisan. Yes.
yeah, it comes out really quick.
Yeah.
But what I've noticed, and I don't know if it's like this in Minnesota, the all of this is supposed to achieve a purpose, and it's whether all this division and all this hyperbole is supposed to achieve a purpose, yet what you see is a deadlock, a complete breakdown of things, and things not happening. So why would they continue to do that if nothing is happening?
Because voters let them. Like, that's the simple answer. What is rewarded is what will continue. If members do not, well, and that's the thing. If your voters, so let's say you get elected to Congress and or the state legislature or city council or whatever, you go in and you say, this is what I'm going to do. And if your voters say, well, yeah, it's absolutely okay that you're not doing anything, you don't get anything done because you are standing up for our values, you're standing up against the evil other party, and of course you're not going to compromise, then you're not going to. But if voters say, we've had enough of this, and what we need is people to go compromise, then it's on the voters to reward the people who do compromise. I mean, something like 83% of voters say, I think this was a Reagan poll, that they want elected officials to work together. But you wouldn't necessarily see that when people go vote. If you want people to work together, you absolutely have to support the ones that will. And if it's just the ones that won't, just dragging their feet, then they're likely doing it because they can get away with it.
Yes. When they generally ask that question about bipartisanship and being able to talk these through, those things get high marks, real high marks. And then the other thing that always gets me is that Congress always gets very low marks. I mean, Congress is right up there with like root canal and
Brussels sprouts.
It's like, and nobody, like, that's where they're at. Yet, yet they still get elected over and over again and doing these things with no real results. But meanwhile, the electorate gets spun up and spun up and spun up. And then you get violence like what you saw in Minnesota and what other places throughout the country is experiencing. I mean, even the guy who killed the United Healthcare CEO or something like that. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's
political. Who also was from Minnesota. We're having a banner year.
Right on the map, huh? What happened to this Minnesota Nice thing?
I don't know. Luckily that wasn't here. Like, that was a New York thing, which is a little more explainable. But yes, something. Yeah, I set my 2025 bingo card on fire a couple of weeks ago. Like, just forget. Like, I'm done playing. 2025 can quit it.
We'll start over in 2026. So tell me about your organization before we close out.
Yeah, so we are a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization working to bring civility back into our political and civic culture, whether that's actual politics, whether it's, the politics of your Rotary Club or your kids' soccer parent association or your workplace, like when you can't deal with the person in the next cubicle over because of the politics, like that's a challenge. So we work on finding a space for people in the middle. We elevate the conduct that we like to see. I don't know if you're familiar with the term gentle parenting. Yeah. Okay. So
Yeah.
I don't have any kids, but my somebody told me one time, like, oh, you walk around the Capitol and you gentle parent legislators. If they do stuff that I don't like, I just ignore it. But if when they are working across the aisle, I do my best. Like praise that, hold that up, like even to media, like
Mhm.
telling the political reporters, like, hey, there's two people working together on this thing. You should do a story about that. Don't do a story about the people who are fighting. Do a story
Mhm.
about that.
Mhm.
Because what is rewarded is what will continue.
Yeah, well, I could see that working because they like praise. They tend to like that praise
We
and
all
good.
do.
It's
We
good
all
news.
do. Absolutely.
Good news. It does hit the part of us that that reward that makes us uh, work
Yes.
and get to the things that reward thing. The biscuit.
Yes,
Get the biscuit.
absolutely.
Get the biscuit. Sorry, I was dealing with my German Shepherd right before we got on. But you're doing great work, even if
Oh,
it's
thank you.
local, even for Minnesota, because
Yeah.
I love having people on that are dedicating their life to making the world a better place in
Yeah.
some way, shape, or form. I love having people on like that. People who have, you know, stories of resilience and just people trying to do something because
Yeah.
it's real easy. You could be sitting there, Shannon, and you could be the biggest Facebook troll on the history of man about, you know, how bad things are, but you decided to go ahead and you know, this organization and try to get people to talk, get people to meet somewhere. So you're creating a better world in your little niche of the world.
Yeah.
And that for that I am grateful. Thank you so
Well,
much.
I'm grateful for you using your platform to elevate that because that is something that we need to do more of is to talk about work that is being done and hope that is possible.
Mhm.
Because like I tell people, it's either do this work or sit on the couch and cry. And I don't want to spend my evenings that way.
No, you could only eat so much ice cream. I mean, you're going to get
Exactly.
diabetic. It's just not good for you.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
if people look you up, what are ways they can help your organization?
The best ways that we so one of the things that we do is we have this statewide footprint. Minnesota is a pretty geographically large state, so we do a lot of things that are virtual, which sort of invite people from all over to participate. So if you go to our website majoritymiddle.org, we encourage people to sign up for the newsletter, and then you can read about all the things that we're doing. You can participate in online events. You can read stories of hope, and like I said, we try to elevate the people who are doing good work. So that's an easy entry. Obviously, I mentioned we are a nonprofit, so if anybody has dollars that they would like to send to us, we would happily take those. And yeah, that's the thing.
Unfortunately, you need money to do these things.
We do need
It's
money to
part
do
of
the
it. You
things.
need
Yeah.
money to do the things. And things cost money, and they cost particularly more. So,
Yes.
again, thank you so much for coming on. Can you stick around after the show real quick?
Absolutely.
Thank